Rain soaked through Daniel's thin jacket within seconds, clinging coldly to his skin as he stood beside his car. The highway felt even emptier now that he was outside it. Vast fields stretching into darkness, the distant outline of hills barely visible beneath the storm clouds. Wind swept across the open land, carrying the sharp scent of wet earth and asphalt. He took a slow step forward, then stopped. "What are you doing?" he muttered under his breath. His shoes sank slightly into the muddy roadside. Behind him, his old sedan idled with a weak hum, headlights cutting through the rain like two tired eyes. He could still get back inside. Lock the doors. Drive home. No one would blame him. Daniel rubbed his face, exhaustion heavy in every movement. His mind began listing all the reasons to leave. The rent was overdue again. His electricity bill sat unpaid on the kitchen counter. His younger sister's school fees were due next week. He couldn't afford trouble. Lightbulb, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share with friends. Your support keeps these stories coming. What if the police questioned him? What if this was some kind of setup? Stories like that weren't rare on isolated highways outside the city. People took advantage of kind strangers. Thunder cracked above, making him flinch. He looked back at the small figure lying ahead. Rainwater pooled around her, soaking her clothes, washing strands of hair across her face. She hadn't moved. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't your problem," he whispered, almost convincing himself. But then another thought crept in, quieter, heavier. "What if she dies because you drove away?" The words felt like a weight pressing against his chest. He imagined waking up tomorrow, seeing a news report about a young girl found dead on this very road. He imagined knowing that he had seen her and chosen himself over her life. His stomach twisted. "I can't," he breathed, shaking his head. "I can't just leave her." The storm roared louder, as if demanding his answer. For a brief second, fear won. He turned halfway back toward the car, one foot already lifting to retreat into safety. But guilt gripped him harder. He thought of his late mother, how she used to say, "Son, when you can help, you help, even if it costs you something." Daniel closed his eyes, rain running down his face like cold tears. Then, with a trembling breath, he turned fully toward the motionless girl. Whatever this was, danger, responsibility, trouble, he would face it. He stepped forward, each stride heavier than the last, moving closer to the unknown and closer to a decision that would soon test everything he believed about himself. Daniel's shoes splashed through muddy water as he dropped to his knees beside the girl. Up close, the sight stole the air from his lungs. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. Her face was pale beneath the rain, lips slightly blue, dark hair tangled against her cheeks. One side of her forehead was bruised, a thin line of dried blood barely visible under the water, washing over her skin. "Hey, can you hear me?" Daniel's voice trembled. No response. He gently touched her shoulder. Her body was cold, far too cold. Panic surged through him. He leaned closer, straining to hear over the storm. There it was, faint, uneven breathing. Shallow. Fragile. "She's alive," he whispered to himself, relief and fear colliding in his chest. Thunder roared overhead. This road was miles from the nearest village, surrounded by farmland and scattered eucalyptus trees bending violently in the wind. No houses. No help. Daniel slid one arm behind her back and another beneath her knees. Okay, I've got you," he said, though she couldn't hear him. She was lighter than he expected, frighteningly light, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. As he lifted her, her head fell against his chest, limp and unresponsive. For a terrifying second, he thought she had stopped breathing. No, stay with me," he muttered urgently. Rain drenched them both as he staggered toward the car. His old sneakers slipped against the slick ground, nearly sending them both crashing down. He yanked open the back door and carefully laid her across the seat. Her wet clothes soaked into the worn fabric instantly. Daniel jumped into the driver's seat, hands shaking as he turned the key. The engine sputtered once. "Not now, please, not now," he begged. The engine roared to life. He slammed the door shut and pressed hard on the accelerator. The tires spun briefly before gripping the asphalt, and the car shot forward into the storm. The nearest hospital was in the city, at least 20 minutes away, without traffic. Tonight, the rain made everything slower and more dangerous. Daniel kept glancing in the rearview mirror. "Stay with me," he called out. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe." The girl didn't move. Lightning illuminated the road ahead as he weaved carefully through the downpour, heart pounding louder than the thunder. Every second felt like it might be her last. And as the distant glow of city lights finally appeared through the rain, Daniel pressed harder on the gas, racing not just against the storm, but against time itself. The hospital doors burst open as Daniel rushed inside, his shoes squeaking against the polished tile floor. The bright fluorescent lights felt harsh after the darkness of the highway. Rainwater dripped from his clothes, leaving a trail behind him as he carried the unconscious girl in his arms. "Help! Please, somebody help," he shouted, his voice echoing across the nearly empty emergency ward. A nurse at the reception desk jumped to her feet. "What happened?" "I found her on the highway. She's barely breathing." Within seconds, 2 medical staff members hurried over with a stretcher. Daniel carefully laid the girl down as doctors began checking her pulse, shining a light into her eyes. "She's hypothermic," one doctor said urgently. "Possible head trauma. We need to move, now." They began wheeling her toward the emergency room, but another nurse stopped and turned back to Daniel. "Sir, are you her guardian?" "No." Daniel shook his head. "I don't even know her name." The nurse hesitated. "We'll need identification. And someone has to take responsibility for the treatment." Daniel's stomach dropped. He glanced toward the swinging emergency room doors where doctors were already working around her. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked. "She needs immediate care," the nurse replied firmly. "Scans, medication, possibly surgery. It won't be cheap." Cheap. The word echoed painfully in his mind. Daniel thought of his nearly empty bank account, the rent due, the bills stacked at home. He barely managed to survive each month. He swallowed hard. "If you don't treat her, what happens?" The nurse's expression softened. "Without intervention, she may not make it." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Daniel looked at his trembling hands. This wasn't his responsibility. He didn't know her. No one would expect him to take on this burden. But then he remembered her pale face on the roadside, the faint rise and fall of her fragile breathing. "Give me the forms," he said quietly. The nurse blinked. "Sir, I'll sign. Put it under my name." She handed him a clipboard. The numbers listed at the bottom made his chest tighten. It was more than 3 months of his salary. His hand hovered over the signature line. Then, without allowing himself to think any further, Daniel signed. "Just save her," he whispered. The nurse nodded and hurried away. Daniel stood alone in the waiting area, soaked clothes clinging to him, heart pounding as machines beeped faintly beyond the emergency room doors. He had no idea who she was. But somehow, deep inside, he felt that this night was far from over. Daniel sat in the hard plastic chair of the hospital waiting area, drenched and shivering. The smell of antiseptic mixed with a faint odor of rain-soaked clothes lingered in the air. His hands were still trembling, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline of the rescue. Every so often, he glanced toward the emergency room doors, where muffled voices and hurried footsteps told him the girl was still fighting for her life. He tried to calm his racing mind, telling himself to breathe, to wait. But the quiet of the waiting area pressed in, broken only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. His eyes wandered to a small television mounted in the corner, the hospital news channel looping through local headlines. A familiar, urgent tone grabbed his attention. "Breaking news. The daughter of one of the city's wealthiest businessmen has been reported missing for 3 days. Authorities believe she may have been abducted." The news anchor's voice droned over the images of city streets swarming with police cars and reporters. Daniel leaned closer. His heart skipped a beat. The girl on the screen looked familiar. Dark hair, delicate features. The anchor continued, showing a photograph of the billionaire father, A man in a tailored suit, standing in front of towering glass windows, his expression a mixture of desperation and fear. She was last seen leaving her school in Victoria Island. The anchor continued. Anyone with information is urged to contact authorities immediately. The family has promised a substantial reward for her safe return. Daniel's throat went dry. He sank lower into the chair, trying to shake off the unease creeping over him. His mind raced. Could it be? No, it couldn't. He barely knew her. He didn't even know her name. And yet, the photograph on the screen felt like a mirror of the girl he had pulled from the roadside, wet, unconscious, and shivering in the rain. What could it be? He whispered to himself, gripping the edge of the chair. Is it really her? He couldn't look away from the screen as the billionaire's voice came through in a pre-recorded message, pleading for the safe return of his daughter. The desperation was unmistakable. The weight of the situation pressed on Daniel like the storm outside, heavy, relentless, and inescapable. A shiver ran through him, but this time it wasn't just from the cold. The realization was settling in, like a slow, heavy tide. The girl he had saved might not just be anyone. She might be the missing daughter everyone had been searching for. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. His chest tightened. He had saved her life without knowing who she was, and now, every moment he had spent worrying about bills and safety seemed trivial compared to the storm that was about to hit his life. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady his pulse. Outside, the rain continued to lash the windows, echoing the turmoil inside him. One thought kept repeating in his mind. I have to stay. I have to make sure she's okay. The screen switched back to the newsroom, but Daniel barely noticed. His eyes remained fixed on the girl's photograph, connecting he could see, and slowly, dread and anticipation mixed with hope as the truth began to dawn. Daniel's gaze flickered between the television mounted in the corner of the hospital waiting area and the room where the girl lay under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. Every detail pressed itself into his mind. The way her dark hair clung to her damp cheeks, the pale curve of her face, the delicate line of her jaw. He could hardly believe it. No, it couldn't be. Yet the photograph on the news screen and the unconscious girl before him were identical. Every feature, every expression frozen in time, lined up perfectly. The same soft curve of the lips, the same wide, dark eyes that seemed almost closed now under swollen lids. His heart skipped a beat. She looks exactly like her, he whispered under his breath, voice trembling. Daniel's knees felt weak as he sank into a chair near the hospital room, rainwater dripping from his jacket onto the tile floor. The chaos of the emergency ward faded, leaving only the pounding of his own heartbeat and the distant hum of the television. Images of the bustling city outside, taxis weaving through the neon-lit streets, street vendors huddling under tarps, the restless flow of Lagos life, seemed to blur around him. Here, in this sterile, fluorescent-lit room, time slowed. The nurse approached with a clipboard, giving him a questioning look, but he barely noticed. His mind replayed every detail of that rainy highway, lifting her into his arms, the weight of her limp body, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Every movement now carried a new meaning. This wasn't just a random girl in danger. This was someone whose life had captured the attention of the entire city. Daniel shook his head, trying to clear the fog. No, it can't be, he muttered. Yet, deep down, the truth was undeniable. Every instinct, every fleeting image, told him that the girl he had risked everything for was not just a stranger. She was the missing daughter. The daughter of a billionaire, the girl everyone had been searching for, the one the city's news channels had been broadcasting nonstop. His hands curled into fists, knuckles white, as a mix of shock, disbelief, and awe washed over him. He had saved her life without knowing it, and now, the consequences of that single decision were becoming terrifyingly real. A soft beep from the monitors in the room reminded him that she was still fragile, still fighting. Daniel leaned closer, brushing a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, voice barely audible, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "I've got you. You're safe now." Outside, the rain continued to lash against the hospital windows, mirroring the storm of emotions inside him. And in that quiet, surreal moment, Daniel realized that life as he knew it had just shifted, irrevocably, unexpectedly, and forever. Daniel barely had time to process the truth when the quiet hum of the hospital was shattered by the roar of engines outside. Through the rain-streaked glass doors, he saw sleek black luxury cars gliding into the hospital parking lot, tires splashing puddles onto the pavement. The contrast was stark, his own beat-up sedan, caked with mud, compared to these polished, intimidating machines. A group of men in crisp suits jumped out, their movements precise, almost rehearsed. Each carried a sense of authority, radios crackling softly at their ears. Armed security surrounded them like a wall of steel, their eyes scanning every corner, every hallway. Daniel's heart thumped violently in his chest. He had never been close to wealth like this, never imagined walking into the same room as such power. The doors swung open, and a tall man with sharp features and a commanding presence strode inside. His tailored suit was immaculate, shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his eyes, dark, intense, unyielding, swept the emergency ward like a predator searching for prey. This was him, the billionaire father, the man whose daughter Daniel had unknowingly saved. "Where is she?" the man demanded, voice low but edged with authority. Doctors nearby stiffened under the weight of his gaze. "She's in the ICU." One of the doctors responded carefully, glancing at Daniel. "We're monitoring her. She's stable for now." The billionaire's eyes fell on Daniel, who was still seated nearby, rain-soaked and exhausted. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The difference between them was almost tangible. Daniel, a man whose life had been defined by struggle, and this father, surrounded by security, money, and power. "Who is responsible for bringing her in?" The billionaire's voice was sharp, demanding. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. He rose slowly, hands slightly trembling. I found her on the road. She was alone, injured. I brought her here," he said, voice low but steady. The billionaire studied him, eyes narrowing as though measuring the man's worth, the weight of his actions. Around them, security shifted, ready to assert control if needed, but the doctor intervened. "He saved her life," the doctor said firmly. "Without him, she might not have made it." For a long moment, the billionaire said nothing. His gaze lingered on Daniel, then softened just slightly as he glanced at his daughter through the ICU glass. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, a clash of worlds, wealth and privilege against courage and compassion born from struggle. Daniel's chest tightened under the weight of the scrutiny, yet he remained calm, knowing that whatever happened next, he had done the right thing. Outside, the rain continued to pound against the windows, echoing the storm of emotions and power shifts now converging in this small hospital room. The billionaire took a deep breath and finally stepped closer to the ICU, his security flanking him, signaling the beginning of a meeting that would change Daniel's life forever. The ICU was quiet now, save for the soft beeping of monitors and the faint hiss of oxygen. Daniel stood a few steps back, drenched in rainwater that still clung stubbornly to his jacket, his shoes scuffing the polished floor. He couldn't take his eyes off her. The girl's chest rising and falling steadily, her dark hair damp against the pillow, the faint twitch of her fingers signaling life. Suddenly, the ICU door swung open, and the billionaire entered, flanked by two security guards. The polished leather of his shoes clicked sharply against the tile. His eyes immediately locked onto the fragile figure in the bed. "No," the billionaire whispered, his voice breaking. His steps quickened. "Is it really you?" The girl's eyelids fluttered open, hazel eyes blinking against the bright hospital lights. She coughed softly, a hoarse sound that made Daniel wince. The father reached her side in a rush, his hands trembling as he gently cupped her face. "My baby, my little girl," he murmured, tears spilling freely down his cheeks. The security guards and medical staff stepped back, giving the father and daughter a moment that seemed suspended in time. Daniel's heart pounded. He could see the gratitude in the father's eyes, but also the weight of disbelief. Then, the billionaire's gaze shifted toward him. You brought her here?" he asked, voice barely steady, cracking under the surge of emotion. Daniel nodded, wiping his own hands on his jacket. "I found her on the road. She was alone, badly hurt. I didn't know who she was. I couldn't leave her there." The billionaire's hand lingered on his daughter's arm before turning slowly toward Daniel. "You saved her life," he said, voice a mixture of awe and raw emotion. His posture softened slightly, the tension of power and wealth giving way to gratitude. "Do you know what you've done? You saved my daughter." Daniel felt warmth spread through him, mingled with exhaustion. He shook his head. I didn't think about that. I did what anyone should do." The billionaire stepped closer, placing a firm, almost protective hand on Daniel's shoulder. "No," he said, voice unwavering. "Not anyone could have done what you did. You risked everything, yourself, your safety. You gave her a second chance. I am forever in your debt." The girl stirred again, faintly smiling as she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was soft, fragile, but Daniel caught it all the same. Relief washed over him in waves, the kind that comes when fear, doubt, and danger finally give way to safety and life. Outside, the rain continued to beat against the windows, a soft, steady rhythm that felt almost celebratory. In that small, sterile ICU, two worlds had collided, wealth and power, fear and courage, but in the end, it was life, compassion, and human kindness that triumphed. Daniel took a deep breath, realizing in that moment that something in his life had changed forever. The ICU was quiet now, the soft beeping of machines echoing like distant drums. Daniel stood near the window, rain still streaking the glass outside, his soaked jacket folded awkwardly over his arm. The adrenaline from the rescue had faded, leaving his muscles stiff and his mind buzzing with exhaustion. The billionaire father approached, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, shoes clicking softly against the tile floor. But even in his wealth and power, the man's eyes were gentle now, filled with gratitude and relief. He stopped a few steps from Daniel, the storm outside contrasting the calm intensity of the moment inside. "You risked your life to save her," the billionaire said quietly, reaching into his pocket. "You shouldn't have. And for that, I want to offer you something, a reward. A sum that could change your life entirely." Daniel froze. He had imagined gratitude, maybe even a simple handshake. Money? That wasn't why he had helped her. Not that he had thought about money at all. "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. His voice was firm, but there was a nervous edge. "I didn't do this for money. I couldn't leave her there. That's all." The billionaire studied him, eyes scanning Daniel's rain-soaked clothes, the dirt still clinging to the soles of his shoes. "I can see that," he said, voice softer now. "But refusing this, it doesn't just waste your own opportunity. It would waste the chance for me to repay you. You saved my daughter. That isn't something that can be measured in words alone." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked down at his worn sneakers, the modest ring of keys in his pocket, reminders of a life full of struggle. "Sir, I don't need that." "I'm fine," he murmured, almost apologetically. The billionaire took a slow step closer. "Daniel," he said, using his name as if to anchor the truth between them. "This isn't about pride. It's about life. You saved hers. I will not let that sacrifice go unnoticed. Consider it a new beginning, not a gift, but a chance to change your own life. You deserve that." Daniel swallowed hard. The words echoed in his mind. New beginning, change, chance. He had spent years trapped in routine and struggle, yet here, standing in the quiet hospital room, he realized that one act of compassion had opened a door he never imagined could exist. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, the city lights reflecting in tiny pools along the pavement. Daniel looked up at the billionaire, nodded slowly, and finally allowed himself a small, humbled smile. "Thank you," he whispered. I'll do my best." The billionaire placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but kind. I know you will, he said. And this is only the beginning. For the first time in years, Daniel felt hope, a fragile, shining hope that life could truly be different. The storm outside had passed, leaving a quiet calm, mirrored by the promise of opportunity and the power of a single, selfless act. Months had passed since that stormy night on the lonely highway. The Lagos skyline gleamed under the midday sun, glass towers reflecting the shimmering waters of the Atlantic and the vibrant pulse of Victoria Island below. Daniel's life had shifted in ways he had never imagined. Gone were the endless worries about bills and late rent. His small apartment now felt warm and secure, and a steady job at a reputable logistics company gave him both confidence and stability. He hummed softly as he arranged a few papers on his desk, the hum of city traffic drifting in through the open window. The faint scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder of that fateful night, even as the world around him moved forward in its relentless rhythm. A soft knock at the door caught his attention. He looked up, surprised. Standing there was the girl, now healthy, vibrant, and smiling, accompanied by her father, the billionaire whose life Daniel had inadvertently touched so profoundly. "Hi, Daniel," she said softly, her voice still carrying the faint tremor of that fragile girl he had saved months ago. I just wanted to see you." Daniel's heart swelled. He stood quickly, brushing his hands against his pants. "Hey, you look amazing," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I'm glad you're well, alive and okay." Her father stepped forward, the same calm, authoritative presence now softened by gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for that night," he said, placing a respectful hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You didn't just save her life, you gave us hope when we were losing it." Daniel shook his head, feeling humility wash over him. "I just did what anyone would do," he murmured. I couldn't leave her there." The girl stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his arm. "You saved me," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I'll never forget that. You're my hero." For a moment, the three of them stood together, a quiet connection bridging worlds so different, yet so intertwined by that single act of compassion. Outside, the city's chaos hummed on, the honk of cars, the calls of street vendors, the glinting boats bobbing lazily in the lagoon. But inside Daniel's small apartment, there was peace, warmth, and a bond that could never be broken. I have something for you," she said, holding out a small journal she had been keeping, memories, sketches, and even a note for Daniel. "So you'll remember how much of a difference you made." Daniel took it, eyes moist. "I'll treasure it," he said. In that moment, he understood the power of a single choice, the ripple of kindness, and the promise of a life changed forever. As the sun spilled golden light across the room, Daniel felt it, hope, gratitude, and the quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of something beautiful.